Meghan Murphy. Thank you for joining me today.
Sorry, I didn't know I was early.
Time zones are so messy. It's really weird with the because you're.
It might have gotten confused because I was in Canada, I think, when we originally scheduled it, and now I'm in Mexico, so
That's
I'm on
right.
CST. So it's like it's 7:40 my time, but I guess what
Yeah, and
now I don't know what time zone we were talking about.
yeah. So 7:30 Pacific time, but that's fine. So we'll.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll.
I mean, I can come back in an hour if you want me to.
No,
I'm just sitting
no, I
around
don't.
here.
Since we're here, why don't we just get into it? I've been looking forward
Okay.
to having a chat with you since I spoke with you the first time. I really appreciate all the stuff that you've been doing. You've obviously you've been around for a while doing this activism and putting yourself out there, putting yourself in a dangerous position, of course. Originally, first I got wind of you was with Jordan Peterson fighting against Bill C4, was it?
C16 was the gender identity and gender expression bill that passed back in 2017.
So can you explain what the main objection was? I know people call it the free speech bill, or compelled speech bill. But what was the main crux of that?
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing in the bill about compelled speech. I mean, Jordan Peterson's concerns really did come to fruition in a lot of ways. But the bill itself was not super specific in terms of what legislation or what laws were going to be affected. But what happened was that gender identity and gender expression were added to the Human Rights Code and the Criminal Code.
Mm-hmm.
And what I feared, so when I spoke out against this bill and testified against it at the Senate, I was concerned that the bill would essentially nullify women's rights. Like if anybody can be a woman, if a man can be a woman, then there are no women's rights. I mean, what kind of spaces can we protect? What kind of rights or laws can we protect if there's no such thing as a woman at all? And I mean, this is what's happened, right? So we're seeing men accessing women and girls' change rooms. We're seeing men get transferred to women's prisons. Men are allowed to freely access women's shelters and transition houses, so spaces for women escaping domestic violence. And like if the word woman doesn't mean anything, then what even is a woman's right? It doesn't make any sense, and we have no ground to stand on.
Yeah, my big concern in this whole thing is I have a young daughter and I have a wife, and she's petite, right? She's a very small woman, and I feel very concerned when I'm out in public. Obviously, I can't go in and protect her and be her bodyguard in these women-only spaces. So my thought is always that women should have these women-only spaces where men can't just come in and identify and then go in there, because we know that there are benign characters out there that they're just trying to fulfill their whatever thing that's going on in their life, and that's a thing. But there are predators that use these opportunities to go in and fulfill what predation that they want to do. Now, is there some sort of like threshold for like legally or anything for when a woman becomes a woman? You know what I mean? Like we all know what a woman is, but like when a man decides that he's going to become a woman, is there any criteria to that?
Not really anymore. There used to be a lot more barriers. Like you would need to have gone to therapy for a certain amount of years. You would need a recommendation or letter from a doctor or a therapist. And you would have to be able to prove that you had been living as a woman for a certain number of years. But those barriers no longer exist. You can essentially fill out a form online requesting that your ID be changed. So it's just, at the last event that we did, which ended up being in Parksville, the last event that we did on Vancouver Island,
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to be at the Cowichan Community Center, but they pulled out. And so we did it at the Parksville Community Center instead. And there was one man in the audience who stood up and said, What I'm hearing, Meghan, is that you think that all trans people are predators and dangerous perverts. And don't you think that trans people are marginalized and you're presenting all trans people as rapists? And I mean, the premise of the question is problematic. Sorry to use that overused word.
I cringe every time I hear that word, by the way. I do.
I know. It's like when I say problematic or like privileged or whatever, marginalized, all those words have become triggering to me. But nonetheless, first of all, I don't think that there is such a thing as a trans person, because I think the concept itself is incoherent. I don't know.
Explain that a bit then.
I mean, I don't know what, and none of us know. It's not just, I'm not being like, I don't understand. Nobody knows what a trans person is. There's no real definable category or definition of a trans person, because you might say a trans person this is what somebody who believes in this concept or a trans activist might say, or what you might find if you Googled this online. A trans person is somebody whose gender doesn't match the sex they were born in or the sex assigned to them at birth. First of all, sex isn't assigned at birth. Sex is observed at birth. Nobody is putting a sticker on your forehead and being like, I deem you male. They're observing that this baby is male based on genitalia.
It's pretty straightforward. It's
pretty straightforward. Yeah. So this idea that people feel completely aligned with these gender roles and stereotypes that are attached to their sex is just, it's not true. It's not real. This is not, and I'm not talking about, gender fluidity. It's just that I don't relate to every single feminine stereotype. I've always felt rather masculine in a lot of ways, honestly. I spend a lot of time with men. I have a lot of male friends. When I was a kid, I was a tomboy. I didn't like girl things. I hated pink. I didn't want to wear a dress. I didn't want to go to ballet class. And when I did go to ballet class, I wore the boys' outfit. And it wasn't because I thought I was a boy. Mm-hmm. I just didn't like girly things. And I sort of thought that being a girl was boring, I thought that boys got to have more adventures and do more fun stuff. And of course that's not true. No. But luckily, I was a kid in the 90s, and the message back then was still, you can be whoever you want to be. So it was okay for me to be a girl that didn't necessarily like girly things. There was never the idea and the concept that maybe this means that you're actually not a girl. It just did not exist then. There's lots of men who maybe like feminine things or feel more aligned with femininity in certain ways. And there's lots of women who maybe feel more aligned with masculinity in certain ways. And it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Who cares? Feel however you want to feel. Wear what you want to wear. Have the personality that you want to have. And when I say wear whatever you want to wear, I don't mean wearing fetish gear in public. But
that's pretty horrible. Yeah, that's quite.
Yeah, I don't need you to keep your sexuality to yourself. Nobody needs to know. It's not our business, and nobody's interested. So keep it in your house. But in as far as if you're a woman and you want to wear men's clothes, I wear men's clothes all the time. I do. I'll wear
it's easier one way than the other. Let's just say
shoes.
that I'm a mechanic, and if I showed up in stilettos, I'd probably not do very well for the day.
No, you would look stupid. Again, it's not
yes.
I mean, men look stupid in women's clothing. Despite the fact that I'm saying, okay, wear whatever you want. Women's clothing do not suit men. They don't fit men well. They look stupid. But if you want to do that, go ahead. It doesn't mean that your sex has changed. There's no such thing as changing your sex. It's impossible to change your sex. And lots of people who identify as transgender haven't done any of these surgeries and maybe aren't even on these hormones. It's just a feeling. It's just an identity. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a coherent idea or category of people. So this was such a long-winded way of getting back to this guy's question, but it was you say trans people are all perverts, and I'm like, no, because as far as I'm concerned, you could just be saying everyone's a pervert. Who are you talking about? Who are these trans people? But also, no, I'm talking about men And again, that's not like, I would never say all men are perverts or all men are predators or all men are dangerous, but the people who are dangerous to women and girls are men. Like, that is just the reality. It's not an insult, but the men who sexually assault, or the people who sexually assault, who rape, who, you know, peep on women in private spaces, those are men. And that's why there's specific spaces that are designated for women only and girls only. And now that these, now that it's accepted for men who identify as trans, whatever that means, to access these spaces, we are seeing all sorts of incidences of men going into women and girls change rooms, into spas, and doing like creepy or maybe dangerous things.
Mm-hmm.
And we have dangerous men, like men who are rapists, being transferred into women's prisons, and women's prisons.
Well, not only doing that, but like actually like insisting on it. Like actually, so there's a case of I think it's Jonathan turned Jessica Yaniv in Vancouver, correct? I think it was in Vancouver, and
yeah.
Are you're familiar with the case? So it was originally.
Oh yeah, he took credit for having me banned from Twitter, Jonathan Yaniv, because I was banned from Twitter for misgendering Jonathan Yaniv. I was banned from Twitter for 4 years for referring to Jonathan Yaniv as him.
So for the people listening or watching that don't know the story, Jonathan Yaniv turned Jessica Simpson. I thought that's hilarious, but it was a rotund man, right, that transitioned and made news headlines because of going to these little independent spas and insisting to have Brazilian waxes done on her balls. I don't know how you say this. But
his balls.
But then, but like almost for me, it felt like a rent-seeking operation. Like I didn't know if the person was disingenuous with the whole thing.
No, he's a grifter. I mean, he's been doing this for many years. He, before he decided to use this transgender, he didn't at the time identify as transgender. He was using male pronouns still on some of his social media. His photo didn't look anything like he was even trying to look like a woman. And some of his social media, he would say like she or him. Some of them just said him. Some of them said she. But like, his name was still online as Jonathan Yaniv, and he had been going around to like these, like you said, these independent estheticians. So he would find one of them, and most of these women were like immigrants. They were working alone in their houses often, or they were working out of their homes. English is a second language. And he would ask for a Brazilian bikini wax. And they would realize that he was male because he looks and sounds male. And
obvious, yeah.
So they would say no. They would say, sorry, we don't offer this service to men. And then he would threaten to sue them for transphobia. And he was trying to get money out of them. And I believe he did get money out of some of them. And the ones who didn't pay up, he dragged them through the Human Rights Tribunal, the BC Human Rights Tribunal. And yeah, it's a certain point around this, he started referring to himself as Jessica, and his name and identity was being protected by the media at the time. And a blogger actually figured out who he was and found some of his old, not that old, reviews on like Yelp, being like, There was stuff that people found online of him being like, my pizza showed up and it was all messed up. Now you owe me free pizzas for life. Like that kind of thing is what he was up to.
Yeah.
And I referred to him on Twitter as him, and I was banned. And that was it for 4 years.
For 4 years.
And then he bragged about it. He publicly said, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but like he said, I'm personally responsible for getting Meghan Murphy banned from Twitter. Like he was bragging about it.
It was a trophy for him. It was an interesting time on Twitter too, because it was like before the whole Elon Musk, before X, before all of that. There was for maybe people weren't on Twitter at the time and don't realize that the whole thing has changed quite a lot. It used to be almost I don't even know how to put it, but you say something that's off color or something that they don't, I say they, particular individuals didn't like. They would put you into like a hostage situation on your own words. They wouldn't outright ban you. I don't know if did you get outright banned, or did they do the?
I got outright banned. I got permanently banned. But I had, leading up to that, they had locked me down a couple of times. Once for saying men aren't women, though. So they locked down my account and they said you have to delete this tweet, otherwise you can't get your account back. And I didn't realize at the time that deleting the tweet was essentially admitting to guilt. I was just like, fine, I'll delete the tweet and then go back on Twitter and be like, I was banned from Twitter for saying men aren't women, which is ridiculous. I wasn't even I wasn't attacking anyone. I wasn't trying to be antagonistic. I wasn't even saying specifically to a person, you're not a woman, though I do say that because that's true. But I was just in the middle of a conversation with somebody who I don't know even if that person was a man or a woman, and said men aren't women though, and they locked down my account. And the other thing that I said that I got locked down for, and they made me delete this tweet too, was what's the difference between, it was something along the lines of what's the difference between a trans woman and a man? And what I was getting at was like, how do you tell the difference between a man and a trans woman? Like on Wednesday, you're a man. On Thursday, you're a trans woman. There's no difference. You're just saying, I'm a trans woman. This category doesn't mean anything. And the trans activists have ensured that this category doesn't mean anything. I mean, it could theoretically mean something. It could mean, okay, you've had all these surgeries, you've been on hormones for a certain amount of time, you wear women's clothing, and you've gotten genital surgery, so you have a prosthetic penis, or, both of these surgeries are horrific.
They are.
By the way.
I don't recommend looking at the pictures of
No, they usually don't work. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But it's not, they're quite dangerous. They usually have to be done over and over and over again. Often they don't take and have really serious complications, and you don't end up with any kind of situation where you can have sexual pleasure. But yeah, I mean, they could, if they wanted to make that the dividing line. I wouldn't personally accept that to mean this person was actually a woman, but then we could talk about that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about, I'm a trans woman because I say so. What does that mean? It means I'm a woman. What does that mean? It means I say I'm a woman. It's just this circular nonsense.
And with
thing.
a lot of them with no effort going into actual changing things. Now, back in the day, we used to call them transvestites, men who would transition over to being a woman. Largely, we're talking about adults, though. We're not talking about children and this contagion that's happening right now. We're talking about people that had severe mental, anguish or illness or whatever you want to call it. The DSM at the time, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, this is for psychology, psychiatrics, labeled it a mental disorder at the time, and now they've changed it because it's largely a political thing. But back then, what did they do? What did transvestites do back in the day that differs from what these trans people are doing today?
Well, I mean, I think that so there's technically two different categories of men who transition. So there's sort of the younger man. This has changed a lot now because we're dealing with kids. So, but that's a very, very recent phenomenon. So prior to that trend, there was the young gay man who either couldn't accept his own homosexuality, didn't feel comfortable with that, or was living in a culture or a household where homosexuality wasn't accepted. So there's lots of cases of men who live in countries where like Iran, like places where it's it's not okay. Like you might even be killed, you know, or it's criminal to be homosexual, to be homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
So an option is still in some of these countries to transition, and then it's fine. So, you know, and so that's a thing that continues to be a thing. And then there's the older man who transitioned, and those guys are autogynephiles. So they have a fetish, and they get basically turned on at the idea of being women, at the idea of being seen as women. They get turned on by wearing women's clothing, and sort of being objectified as a woman. They sort of have like a pornographic fantasy of what a woman is, and they like the idea of seeing themselves as that or being seen as that, which is why part of the fetish involves being out in public. They want to be out in public, and for, you know, somebody to mistake them as a woman or to see them as a woman.
So I read Dr. Deborah So's book, and she went over autogynephilia quite extensively, because she saw it as well, it's a fetish, and that's separate from what people are calling gender issues, but it's being confused, and young men that have autogynephilia are being encouraged to go along with this transgender thing, when a psychologist or a sexologist like Dr. Deborah So wouldn't recommend that. That's because a fetish is a different thing from just living your everyday life, especially if it's a fetish, actually, because you don't want people engaging in their fetish on a daily basis in public. That's not desirable.
Well, and it makes it worse. Like if you talk to, I've interviewed quite a few, they call themselves trans widows. So women who are married to men who at some point in their relationship started, and the steps through which this happens are all very similar. What happens is the guy, he'll start watching so-called tranny porn, and maybe he starts wanting to wear women's clothing in the bedroom. And then he sort of wants to test it out by maybe wearing some women's clothes outside of the house. And then he's like online reading about transgenderism and starts to decide maybe he's a trans woman. And then he wants to go full blown woman, and maybe he wants to get all these surgeries. And this woman is left here like, I married a man. I'm not attracted to you at all anymore.
Yeah.
And I still want like a sex life. And often these guys go through this really kind of adolescent narcissistic phase where they're super emotional. They're also on all these hormones, right? Which is going to mess with you in a variety of ways, mental and physical. And I mean, you shouldn't, like, the more you kind of engage in your fetish, you start living your fetish, and it just becomes everything. And that's what we see happening to these autogynephiles who transition. Like one thing that was just maybe I like to wear women's underwear in the bedroom sometime, they start engaging with more and more and more on a daily basis, and then wearing it into the house, and then wearing it to work. And it's just there all day, every day is this fetish, to the point where it's become their identity. And people don't like to talk about that aspect of transgenderism because it delegitimizes this idea that you can somehow have this internal sense of not being a man and actually being a woman, which, you know, if you genuinely feel that way, that is a mental disorder.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. that really, that sums it up, actually, quite a lot. Really. Now, there's a lot of girls.
It's a lot, I know.
Yeah, it is. It really is. But so there's a lot of girls that suffer from this too, and for different reasons. So you have your autogynephilic men that get sucked into this, and I don't agree that those men are necessarily transgender. That they're kind of getting swept up in this this thing, because it's a sexual fetish that they're going through. But then you also have women, and it almost seems like this whole ideology is actually erasing gay women. Like you can't, like, no one would be encouraged to just be a lesbian anymore. You can't be a gay man, and you can't be a lesbian, or also you can't just be an awkward teenager going through puberty. anymore.
Right.
I hear so many.
You can't just be a girl who's going through puberty and feels uncomfortable with the way that your body's changing.
It's unbelievable because, you know, I'm preparing myself for when my daughter goes through that, and I'm preparing in a way where I can have these conversations, because boy, is it awkward. And it's awkward for me as a guy, as a dude. I don't want to talk about these things with my little girl. I want my innocent little girl, but she's going to grow up. She's going to be a beautiful woman one day and do whatever she wants in her adult life. But I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that, you know, she has a leg up in all of this, and actually have the knowledge going into it. I think a lot of people are ignorant going into this stuff, and parents don't know what to do. Teachers are spreading this information as if it's gospel, when it's all very, very new, and it's really, you know, being pushed on parents. Of course, you know, there's the march. I'll be attending that tomorrow. There was one last month, and you spoke at that. You were at the one in Victoria where they actually stormed the stage and wouldn't let you speak.
Yeah. Which, yeah, I mean, that's not an abnormal experience, unfortunately, for women who speak about these issues. There's this common refrain that I often hear from, I guess, right-wing men in particular, not all right-wing men, but some will be like, where are all the women? Like, where are all the feminists? Why are women letting this happen? Why are feminists letting this happen? And I feel the same way a lot of times, because it is crazy that any woman, never mind somebody who calls themselves a feminist, would go along with this idea that men are women and they should be able to access all these spaces. But, you know, like I and a number of other feminists, I mean, I don't really identify as a feminist anymore because I don't like ideology and I don't like labels and I don't find that word particularly helpful. But, you know, and I don't want to be really pinned down. I don't like it when people say, oh, well, you're a feminist, so you should be blah, or you're not. And I'm like, okay, then I'm not. Let's move on.
Or like being labeled right wing. That's because I get that one a lot. People will say I'm a conservative. I've been called a conservative. What was it? A conservative pundit or something like that on some publication.
Right.
And I never even identified as conservative. I mean, I'll vote for them if they're the better of the choices, but that doesn't mean that I'm part of that group. So I totally feel for you in that way. Okay, you got to explain this to me too, because you know, I never followed the feminist movement except for when they started. When I say they, a particular vocal group of them started going after just culture and TV, movies, video games, all of this stuff. And we all heard about Gamergate, and I think
it's like everything's not feminist, and it's like, okay, do you want everything to be feminist? Because that sounds terrible, but I guess there's a faction of people who do.
So my understanding is that there's like different waves. They call them waves of feminism.
Yeah.
Can you explain that so people understand what that's all about?
Yeah, so the first wave is essentially the suffragettes, the women who fought for the vote. They fought for other things as well, but primarily what they're known for is winning the vote for women, which was actually a very, very long fight. Like, it's sort of treated as a blip in history, but women fought for the right to vote for almost a century before it was won. And they were amazing, brave women who risked a lot for that fight. And I don't even think they identified as feminists at that point. I think that word really came to prominence within the second wave, which began in the 60s. And that started with the whole Betty Friedan, the problem that has no name. So women were housewives. They were supposed to be feeling fulfilled by getting like a new vacuum cleaner and having Tupperware parties, and they weren't. And so they were popping pills and they were like, what's wrong? I'm supposed to I have it all. I'm supposed to be so happy, but I'm not. And that developed into the fight, that most of us are, probably most familiar with in terms of feminist history, which was like the fight for reproductive rights. Radical feminism came out of the second wave movement, and they fought pornography. The fight for
fought against
equality.
Pornography or fought
against pornography.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, there was the radical feminists are very anti-pornography, so that fight began back in the late 70s or early 80s, I would say. And
What was
like
the
the
reason
fight,
behind that?
well, I mean, pornography is quite misogynistic and often violent. So it's sort of sexualizing violent acts against women, or at least degrading acts against women. It's gotten so much worse since the 80s. So it's almost like quaint to think about fighting pornography during that time, because what exists online right now is so much worse. And the problem is so expansive to the point where, you know, kids are watching it, and pornography is essentially impossible to avoid online, even if you want to. Like, I feel so bad for parents that are trying to protect their kids from seeing this stuff.
Absolutely.
But you
The
know, and
reason why I
they,
asked though is because you have maybe you're going to get to this, but you have feminists arguing for sex workers and pornography and stuff like that now. So that kind of jumped out at me as like, okay, so you have parts of the feminist movement that are completely at odds with each other then.
Totally. And that was me, right? So when I started writing about feminism and doing feminist radio, I was fighting against pornography and prostitution. And this was before the gender identity debate had come up. So I was, you know, super controversial and super hated, honestly, among what are called third wave feminists. So these sort of modern feminists that came out of the 90s and much of the left, because I thought that prostitution was harmful to women, certainly not empowering to women, not an empowered choice, which is what the third wave feminists wanted to say. You know, they're making a choice. You know, this can be empowering for women. My little dog's over here trying to drink out of my water glass. So I have to help her. She doesn't like her own water. She wants my water.
Okay.
She's a very special older Chihuahua. But you know, so the third wave feminism, to my mind, functions more as a backlash than anything else. You know, third wave feminism, these are the women who came out with Slut Walk and like all these slogans. I don't know if you remember Slut Walk, but it started in Toronto, and it was supposed to be against victim blaming, but all these women marched in their underwear with the word slut written across their chest, and like, sluts say yes. And, you know, it was connected to this sex work is work, and you can't shame me for anything I do. Everything I do is an empowered choice, yada, yada, yada. And it was all just such nonsense to me. But also really, like, it's like objectification, sexual objectification isn't empowering for women as a whole. Like, selling your body is not empowering. Like, putting your body on the internet for strange men to consume isn't going to make you feel good about yourself in the long run. And the prostitution industry, the sex trade, is a horrific, you know, global trade that sees millions and millions of girls and women abused daily, and they're treating it as this like fun and sexy, I don't know, like, you know, that it's just, oh, well, this is making me feel good right now, so you don't get a say in it. And it's like, okay, well, you're probably going to feel differently in a few years or in 10 years, but also you saying, well, this is my choice, so it's fine, fails to acknowledge the fact that, again, this is like a multi-billion-dollar global industry that mostly consists of trafficked women and girls. You know, most women in prostitution started when they were underage, who are being like used and exploited and raped and abused by men, like lots of men every day. And that's not because no woman wants to do that. Give me a break. Anyone who tells me that any woman wants to do that is a liar or a sociopath.
Well, it sounds like a cope to me for a lot of people, because I think it's enticing because the money's there. Like the modern day sex work, I think for a lot of people is OnlyFans, and it's lucrative because you can do it from the safety of your home, and then you put yourself out there. But then it turns out there's only like a small percentage that are the top earners, and most people they'd be better off having a minimum wage job kind of thing. But
Yeah.
but the your nudes on the internet are there forever. Like once they're out
Yeah.
there, that's it. Your life is, you're now that person that everybody's seen in that sort of compromising thing. So I think not a lot of people really realize how bad that can be for them at an early age. I mean, it's just like anything else that you don't realize could be bad for you. Taking up smoking, getting a tattoo on your forehead. Like this stupid things that kids do. But now these things are like that's one of the options of the stupid things that people can do these days. And
it's stupid things that can potentially scar you for life in a variety of ways. And yeah, you're right. I mean, like, people, men and women, assume that girls on OnlyFans are making thousands and thousands of dollars a month, and that's because there is a tiny minority of women who are making a lot of money every month. And so they advertise OnlyFans, and they're like, I'm making thousands and thousands of dollars a month on OnlyFans, you should join. They get a cut when women join. Like, if a woman on OnlyFans recruits, and like, you want to talk about pimping, recruits a girl, they get a cut of whatever that girl makes.
Wow. That is pimping.
But it's literally pimping. And these women act again like they're doing some like empowered feminist thing, right? And I'm making so much money, like as if you made money and that makes a thing ethical. But most like, I'm like, that's not how this works. Like, where did we get this idea?
Yeah. Or that it's legal.
Then all good.
or that it's legal. So a lot of people use the argument that something's legal, and then that's the justification for it. But there's been societies that have done completely questionable things or abhorrent things legally. I mean, the Second World War in Germany comes to mind about stuff like that, atrocious things that can be done legally. That's not a good justification, in my opinion.
No, of course not. There's more ethical questions to ask beyond that. But yeah, most of the young women on OnlyFans, I think, are averaging like $80 a month or something like that. And like you said, then their images are up there forever. They did all these gross things on the internet for strange men who might, stalk you, who are probably creeps, and you can't take that back. And for what? I think that company is enormously unethical, and I think all the women shilling for them are enormously unethical too. But yeah, anyway, I mean, so that's the second wave feminism. Those feminists were fighting for legislation more than anything else, to make sexual harassment in the workplace illegal, to fight for access to abortion, and, to make marital rape illegal. And the third wave came along and sort of was like, oh, these fuddy-duddy old ladies, we're the new cool sexy feminists, and we love pornography and prostitution, and we're sluts, and we should all have casual sex. And then of course fell into this gender identity thing. So I mean, to my mind, they just didn't have any good foundation to start with. So I suppose it's no big surprise that they went for the gender identity thing. But it's really unfortunate that this is what feminists are, because the word has just become an embarrassment.
So I've always looked at it this way, like when it comes to the workplace, second wave feminism sort of made the workplace more comfortable for women, and third wave feminism made the workplace more uncomfortable for men. This is a situation that this was like the dawn of the sexual allegation stuff,
like Me Too stuff,
movement. Yeah, so people being fired from their jobs based on allegations alone, no criminal charges being filed, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that men when they want to retaliate against another person, they do things violently, right? This is just the innate practice that men have. Women are strong; they're not as strong as men. Sorry, ladies. It's just a fact. But
we were born that way.
Yeah. Right. So. Yeah, testosterone, you get a lot of muscles from that. So men and different behavior patterns too. So men tend to, lash out violently, where where women will use their social skills to character assassinate people. And this is, I mean, when you look at it that way, then it's very telling. Like, Oh, okay. That's why it's all playing out this way. Like the
Yeah.
Me Too stuff, character assassinations, and all of this. But where does feminism stand now? Like, is there two groups of feminists that are fighting each other and just seeing where the dust settles, or what is it?
I mean, there has been a fight among two factions of feminists, I would say, for the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years at least, the fight between these third wave feminists and women like me who, I mean, I always just called myself a feminist. I never identified myself as a radical feminist. I, of course, still don't. And I don't, I don't super identify with radical feminism, but there is a faction of feminists who were fighting things like prostitution and pornography and challenging these sort of third wave ideas that we've been talking about. But the dominant form of feminism is third wave feminism. That's prominent. That's what everyone sees. And I just, I think that I don't know that there is such a thing as a woman's movement nowadays. In the 70s and the 80s, I think if you said the women's movement or the women's liberation movement, you would know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And now nobody knows what these things are. And the things that women who are publicly feminist are fighting for are largely stupid. And, most feminists, as far as I can tell, including the ones who would consider themselves gender critical feminists or radical feminists, the women who are challenging transgenderism are still quite caught up otherwise in woke ideology and in leftist politics that, I think are, bad ideas and bad ideologies. And so it's hard for me to take a lot of those people seriously now.
Well,
I think they're still invested in cancel culture in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to be canceled for being called a transphobe, but they'll happily cancel somebody else who has politics that they've decided are far right, or, this person supports Trump, so they're obviously evil, that kind of thing.
So you said stupid causes, and immediately what popped into my head, because there's been a lot of them over the past years, but immediately what popped into my head was an interview with a feminist and a guy. It was a back and forth on, I think it was on BBC, and the woman was arguing that the temperature control in office buildings is sexist.
It is. I'm not joking. I'm only saying that because I'm a cold person. And when I was younger, I always worked in offices and I was freezing to death. And at a certain point, I realized that it was because men run warmer and the temperature controls were set to be more comfortable for men without realizing that women run colder. And so women at work would always have their sweaters and their cardigans on. And I'd always be freezing and being like, can I wear a toque? And that is actually really, I know it sounds stupid, but
it sounds really stupid.
I was always miserable at the office because I was fucking freezing. And I was like, why can't we turn the temperature? But yeah, temperatures in offices all across North America are set in a way that's comfortable to the male temperature.
So the first thing, the absolute first thing that came to mind was men always have to wear a suit. So men are always wearing suits in offices, and it gets hot.
So they're probably hotter for that. Yeah.
So you get hot.
It's not the worst problem in the world. It's a silly problem to make a big deal out of.
Right?
But I'm only saying that it's true that we are colder, but I'm not saying that it's not a silly problem to make a big deal out of.
I'm going to push back on that because I don't think women are colder because, I used to live in Whistler, which is famous for being a ski town, snow place. Uh-huh. And you go out and the guys waiting in line to get into the club are bundled up and they got their jackets on and everything, and the women would be out there in their skimpiest thing waiting.
That's not because they're not cold. That's because they're making bad choices. And I say this as a person who spent an entire winter when I was 19 in a mesh tank top and a skirt and boots and no jacket.
So it's bad choices.
Yeah, it's just that you want attention over comfort is what the issue there is.
Yeah, that's
rather
fair.
than actually physically not being called.
Well, because I would always wonder, like, are you crazy? Like, I get it. You want to.
It's ridiculous.
Get something to wear before you go into the club, and then go to coat check or something. they have these
would be
things.
Smarter.
But yeah, no. So, I mean, that's one of the things, and a lot of. Well, let's put it this way. There's a lot of men out there that there was a reactionary thing because of this third wave feminism that came about.
Yeah.
And it started, some different movements. There was, one called MGTOW, which Pierre Poilievre was being raked through the coals for, because I guess originally it was men going their own way, and then it morphed into something a lot worse.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, I haven't followed that community closely, but I do know that it was called Men Going Their Own Way. And as I understand it, it was about men who were sort of like, screw this, we aren't dealing with women anymore. We don't need you. We're just going to go be alone forever. So I guess sort of similar to an incel, although they're involuntary as opposed to chosen. But it seems like a group of embittered men who've sort of decided to just give up and be angry. I hadn't realized that Pierre Poilievre had been, what was he accused of?
What he was accused of is his YouTube channel. Apparently on the back end, that tag was in some of his videos on the back end of it.
Oh, okay.
And being a YouTuber myself, I know sometimes, like the old system, you'd add tags because you thought it was a trending topic or something like that at the time, and then you don't think twice about it again, right? That's it. You never. But of course, they went into the HTML and because they're looking for anything to criticize the guy for at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like these. I mean, what a dumb thing to pick on him for. Like, who cares? Like, it's not. And those communities are not dangerous in the way that I think feminists have made them out to be. Like, a lot of those guys are just kind of like sad, lonely, bitter guys, which, if you feel like that and you engage with these communities and you spend way too much time online, then it can turn into sort of a woman hating vibe. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that means that you're necessarily going to act on it. And I don't think it actually means that that's a permanent state. I think some men go through this phase of being like so angry at the world and angry at women and unsatisfied and again feeling lonely. And instead of doing something to better themselves and better their lives so that maybe they'll be a more attractive partner, or maybe they'll just feel happier about themselves and better about themselves, they go into this sort of more dark and toxic place. But I think that the hyperbole around these communities has been hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Like women act like these guys are terrorists, and that doesn't seem to be true. And I think part of that came from, there was one guy who I think identified as an incel who did one of the school shootings. I can't remember what his name was, but it's a bigger problem than just misogyny, as it were.
When you say misogyny, how do you define that word?
I mean, I don't love to use that word anymore, to be honest. I think I was just using that word because that's what they would say, that it was about misogyny.
Sounds like technically
a buzzword when I hear
that all the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love to use jargon, especially politicized jargon. I feel like it doesn't help explain the situation very well and will often just turn people off of listening. Mm-hmm. But technically, misogyny means woman hating. But when you say kind of these guys are misogynist, or you say like pornography is misogynist, and it seems to me that there is a lot of pornography that's misogynist, that's engaging in punishing and humiliating and degrading women. And that's the thing that's getting these guys off. So I think that you could use that in that context and it would be true.
Like a sadistic sort of tendency.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, Yeah, I mean, there is the Me Too movement was a funny one because at first I supported it and I thought, this is good. Women are speaking out about all these things that have been kind of going on behind the scenes that no one's been talking about, and or women have been scared to speak out about, and women haven't felt empowered to speak out about. And, it felt like an important kind of global conversation. But then, like you say, it really just started turning into cancel culture. And like this guy acted like a creep to me on a date. So I'm going to go post about it on the internet. And men were getting canceled and fired and ostracized and losing, like I knew men in Vancouver who basically had to move, and lost their careers, like DJs, right? Who had to stop DJing and leave town and go start a whole new life because women accused them of acting badly, acting inappropriately. I don't know that any of them were literally accused of rape. And I don't think that women necessarily go around lying about rape, but I do think that young women are in this culture now where anytime they feel bad or maybe unsafe or maybe creeped out, or something happens that later they think, oh, I didn't like that, then their first instinct is to go post about it on the frickin' internet. And I don't think that's a good way to handle these kinds of things. I don't think that it's a great way to handle any sensitive issue, to just go trash somebody and post their name on Instagram or Twitter and then demand everybody around you, cancel him, ostracize him, fire him, starting these hate campaigns against individuals without any due process is just totally irresponsible. And there's men who lost their jobs at universities. I know university professors who were accused of something. Like nobody even knows what they were accused of. Even at this point, years later, it was like they were accused of abuse, but nobody would say what that abuse is. It's like, hey, what did he do? Like I remember there was a guy, Stephen Galloway, at UBC. He was the head of the creative writing department at UBC in Vancouver, and this happened to him. And the media started publishing, this guy was accused of something. They wouldn't say what he was accused of, and now he's going through this whole process, and all these women are speaking out against him. And so all the feminists around me were going along with it. Like, this guy is clearly terrible, and of course he should be fired, and of course his whole life should be destroyed. And I was like, okay, but what did he do? Like, can somebody please tell me what the fuck is going on? Well, no, but I've heard that and I can't say, but I know, blah, blah, blah.
I can't say, but I know. Yeah, I
give me a break.
Yeah. I don't.
And they, I was getting canceled in turn because I was asking these questions. And I was like, I can't decide to have some big opinion and go along with some big cancel campaign against a guy when nobody will tell me what happened. And it turned out that it was all bunk. And he, he lost his job. He lost all his friends. He had like a full mental breakdown. He has pretty serious mental health issues now. And I think he's actually still in the process of suing at least a couple of the women for libel or something of the like. But, he was for Canada, a really well-known, successful writer in Canada. He's lost his career all because some woman, who I think by all accounts was not a mentally stable person, who he'd had an affair with and broken up with, accused him after the fact of abuse. Again, there's no account of anything, just abuse.
So like if somebody assaults somebody else, there's criminal law that protects you from things like that, right? Like you're describing this situation, and you have a man whose only recourse at the end of it is to go after people in a civil court. Like you have damages, and you're going after the damages. You don't get closure even in those cases. Like
Yeah.
If this sexual impropriety did occur, there could be criminal charges, and the man could go to jail for that. But you know, and I'm probably not the only one to think this, that maybe there should be criminal charges for women that falsely accuse men of especially the heinous act of raping somebody.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I think about that. I have to think about it more because I suspect that would be more complex than it sounds. But
Yeah, I don't want to
certainly,
infringe
I
on
mean,
people's rights by introducing
yeah, I
something
mean,
that
I wonder if it
could be
becomes like a
misused.
free speech right, and if you say like so and so was abusive, then like is somebody going to charge me because they can prove that they didn't actually punch me in the face or something like that? I
Right.
think, but I mean, it's horrifically destructive and irresponsible, and I mean, it's character assassination. It's just, I mean, unfortunately, libel cases are really hard to win
Very
in
hard.
Canada, again, because of these, free speech issues. Like, you are allowed to share your opinion publicly and online and in writing and things like that.
And especially if the person's a public figure. So if he's an author, or like myself, I'm an online publisher. Yourself as well. If people made an accusation of you, you have very little recourse.
Yeah, and people have libeled me numerous times online. Like, I've been libeled in the Globe and Mail, and I didn't have any recourse. There was just nothing. There's nothing you can do. You kind of just have to let it happen, which is really unfortunate because it does have an impact on people and their careers and their lives.
Absolutely. So moving on, that's a heavy one.
I know. Sorry,
I
Friday night. Woo!
Woo! Yeah, right. So I wanted to ask your opinion on trad wives, because this is a trend going on right now. And are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a trend right now. For people who are listening and don't know what that is, there's a movement of these girls and guys who get involved with these girls. But what they're doing is trad is short for traditional. So it's people who are taking on traditional roles, and they're making it a lifestyle, not just an inward lifestyle, because there's always been a lot of traditional lifestyle people, but they're making this a very public profile thing, where they're getting out there and they're showing on social media. They're like, a lot of it's associated with like 1950s like fashion and stuff like that, because somehow that's traditional. I don't know, like that, yeah. That's the thing. But that's
TikTok.
So that's the appeal or the allure to it. And I think a lot of it is sort of a backlash to the second wave feminism or the third wave feminism that's pushing people into a corner. And some people are like, no, I wanna live my life the way I want to. Back off. You're being too forceful on me. Here, I'm gonna do the opposite of what you're saying, and I'm gonna take on these traditional things. What's your take on this whole thing?
Well, I mean, I think that it does sort of make sense that women would sort of re-embrace the trad, as it were, because for, in recent decades, women have been taught by feminism to believe that it's sort of pathetic to be like a stay-at-home mom. Like, it's lame, it's boring. In order to be an interesting person, you should have a career. But, at the same time, that can be harmful. I think, of course, I've never had kids. I didn't want kids. I've never wanted kids. I'm very happy with that. Like, I like my life, how it is. I like my work. Mm-hmm. But, women who do want to have kids, it makes sense that they would want to stay home with their kids and be around their kids and raise their kids. Again, not all women, and I'm not, of course women should have careers if that's what they want. But I don't think that it feels really great for a lot of women to leave their kids at daycare or to leave their kids with a nanny and to not be around during those formative young years. And it's not great for the babies or the kids. Like, daycare is not great for kids, and kids want to be with their moms. So I guess this sounds like a traditional thing, but I think it's true. And I think, the trad wife trend in as far as social media goes, I think is a little bit silly. And I've heard other women who are sort of actually trad wives in a way, like stay-at-home moms. They do the cooking, they do the cleaning, they do the child rearing. The male's the breadwinner. They're like, if those women were actually trad wives, they wouldn't be on TikTok. They'd be at home cooking and taking care of the kids and cleaning the house.
Absolutely. That's what I thought. Because my wife's a trad wife, but not like the TikTok trad wife. She doesn't want, she wants nothing to do with social media. She never even wants to come in my videos. Like she'll tiptoe in on times when I'm chatting with people online, making sure that she's not on camera. But she is she's very much a traditional housewife. She wants to be a mom. She wants to be with my kids, with her kids. And yeah, it is, I guess, a lifestyle. But
like, I mean, there's an extreme to it, right? Where it would be like you're subservient to a man, which personally I think is unappealing.
Yeah.
To me. I mean, whatever makes you happy, really, at the end of the day. I do think that sort of selling women the idea that they'll be happier if they're subservient to a man and if they don't have a life and if they're just at home sort of serving their husband and cleaning the house and taking care of their kids, that this is like the ideal lifestyle for all women. I think that's definitely a harmful idea. I mean, I really think that women should have as many choices as they can have, but I also think that women shouldn't be lied to, and I think women have been lied to by feminism. Like, it's not true that you can have it all.
I don't think that would make for a healthy relationship, though, one person subservient to the other person. I think a good relationship is a good solid working between two people, and there's all kinds of compromise along the way. I mean, I've been married for 17 years, and there's a lot of compromise, I'll tell you that. And you know, sometimes you have to put your foot down on certain things, but other things you're like, okay, I guess, you know, I'll put the seat up, or I don't know, whatever the thing is.
Well, no, I mean one person making all the decision and one person having no say or power in the relationship is inevitably, I think, going to build resentment, which is going to turn into disrespect and perhaps hatred for the other person. Like, to always be the one to have to give in all the time, you're going to turn into a bitter, resentful person, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think like feminism told women that they could have it all, that they could have a career and they could do kids after, and they can wait, and basically you can have anything you want in life. And it's not true. Like, it's not true for anybody. Like, you have to make choices, and especially for women, like, there is a biological reality where you have fertile years, and if you want to have kids, you need to be thinking about that and planning for that. Women also have been told, you know, like, it doesn't matter, you can just freeze your eggs and do it later. But that's extremely expensive. It's no guarantee. And that's a real messed up, ethically, industry as well. And so it's just another lie that's sold to women. It's like, you know, really what you should do is you should be thinking about in your 20s if you want to have kids or not, and then sort of trying to plan your life around that. Because I know a lot of women who've gotten to 39 or 40 and then been like, oh, okay, I want kids, and then found it to be a lot more difficult than they thought it would be, if not impossible.
Yeah, I feel really, really sad for people that it becomes an impossibility. And then, I mean, it's a life-changing thing for people. I mean, you know, I can understand your position. You don't want to have kids, and that's your decision, and that should be everyone's decision. But like for me, I didn't want to have kids until I wanted to have kids, and then when that happened, it changed my life. It changed everything about social life and home life for me, and even my relationship with my wife. So for those that are like kind of on the fence, man, maybe have a really good thought about it, because time does run out, especially for women, and that's a sad reality, especially when people are being taught things, especially from a young age, like, oh, you don't want that, that's not what you want, and sold kind of a bill of goods, in my opinion. by schools or authorities, even entertainment and all of this, that these aren't the things that you want, and then when they do realize what they want in life, it can be too late, and it really is a sad thing. And we need more voices like yours getting out there to tell people about this, and the hard decisions that you do have to make in your lifetime, as well as the dangers of the real world. I feel, in getting back to like the whole transgender thing and women only spaces, I think what they're doing is they're teaching a naivety to young girls, especially, about women only spaces that are putting them in compromising situations that could get them into a situation where they could be the victim of this predation that is out there. And that predation will always exist. They found this median at the moment to the predators have in order to get away with the things they want to perpetrate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really horrible what they're doing to girls, because it's a challenge already to teach girls that it's okay to say no and to have boundaries, and that if an adult man is being creepy, like, you don't have to be nice to him, you don't have to go along with him, like, and in fact you should get away from him and you should tell an adult that you trust. And now they're being taught the opposite. Like, there's a man in your change room, he has the right to be there. If that man says he's a woman, then you have to go along with that. And I think kids inherently, and they learn, or they used to in any case, know that women are safe. That, like, if you're lost in the grocery store, you're a little kid, you're lost in the grocery store, you can find a woman in the grocery store, you can go up to her and she'll help you. Kids are not taught to trust strange men. No, for good reason.
For very good reason.
And yeah, and again, it's not because all men are dangerous, but it's because some men are dangerous, and some men will take advantage of those kinds of situations. And I think it's so dangerous and awful now to be teaching girls that not only do you have to accept that man in the washroom or the change room, but if you feel uncomfortable about it, or if you feel scared about it, or if, God forbid, you say there's a man in here and he shouldn't be there, then you're bad and you're bigoted. And that's not right. I mean, it's really just putting kids in danger is what it's doing.
Yeah, that's I didn't even think of that. Yeah, even the kids are considered bigots. I know, like, as parents, we've been told that so often now. Like, oh, you're bigoted, you're this or that. But yeah, kids are afraid to even speak out, because they would be seen as the perpetrators of this. It's so sadistic. I mean, to just give those thoughts and put them into a kid's mind that they're the one that's perpetrating some horrible thing when they're just trying to stay safe.
I mean, we shouldn't be inclusive of everyone. That's the reality. Like, all of this inclusivity, accept everyone, accept anything that anybody tells you they are thing, like, that's not true. Like, you don't have to be inclusive of everyone. You don't have to be inclusive of creepy people. Like, and women and girls, again, in particular, need to have boundaries because we're physically vulnerable. Because if we're in a dangerous situation, we can't fight off the predator in the way that a man might be able to. So we have to have different kinds of boundaries and protections set in place, and different boundaries and protections and different kind of, like, spidey senses, for lack of a better word, around who might be a creep and who shouldn't be in this space, and who you don't want to get in a car with, and who like, women walking down a dark street, if there's a man coming towards them, cross the street. And that should feel okay. It shouldn't be like, oh, am I going to hurt this guy's feelings? Because at the end of the day, we do have to protect ourselves. We have to. And we have to do what we can as the weaker sex, as it were. And, and especially, of course, when we're talking about kids are all vulnerable. They're all vulnerable to adult predators, right? So we have to protect them especially, and also teach them as best that we can to say no, and no, it's not okay for men to be in these spaces, and if they are, you should speak out. But yeah, now it becomes impossible. Because who do you speak out to? A man comes into the change room at the pool, and you go to the staff and say, there's a man in there, and they say, oh no, that's a woman. He has the right to be there. Like, what a messed up message.
Is gaslighting too, right? No, that's a woman.
Yeah.
Like in the person, you clearly, that's not the case. Actually, you bring it up, this comes up right at a time. I checked my mailbox today and somebody sent me a book and I was leafing through it before the podcast here tonight. And this is a new book that's hit the shelves. It's called I'm Polite, I Know My Traffic Light. And it's really interesting. Illustrator, sorry, I'm having a hard time reading that. Written by Jennifer Becker. And this book is really interesting because it lays it out as like, it's for kids. And it lays it out like traffic lights. And it gives these social scenarios where, it's okay or, it's not okay. And trust your gut. It's basically telling you that, in certain circumstances, I think there was a few of them here, where, the hockey coach says, hey, maybe stick around and I can teach you a hockey lesson and go back to my place for a hockey lesson. That's when the red light comes out and, your gut should tell you that that's not right. And teach kids with stories like this, like these are the scenarios that are weird and these are the scenarios that are not weird. Sorry.
I mean, females. No, it's good. Yeah, I'm glad that exists, and especially in this day and age. But I mean, females have evolved to have that kind of gut instinct, and we need to trust that gut instinct because our body or something in our surroundings is telling us something. There's a risk, there's a danger. And females, again, in particular, have developed that evolutionarily in different ways. So it's, it's
Canada is pulling
in some ways than it is for men, specifically because we're vulnerable in these ways. And so we need to be we have to have heightened awareness around who might be a creep or who might be a danger, because we need to be able to get out of that situation in, maybe a more strategic way than a man might have to.
So they're teaching us to go against our own natural instinct.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, isn't so much about that, like this idea that we can overcome nature, right? You can change your sex if you want to. No, you can't.
No, you can't.
No, you can't. We've evolved to be this way over millions and millions of years. Like, you can't just stop that. And if you do, something real bad's going to happen. And we're seeing that play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this whole like gendered language, like when I was growing up, it was more of a biological thing. You didn't talk about genders, you talked about sexes, and there's male and female. I've said this one to the audience many times, but I actually believe that there's 4 genders in the English language, and it's a linguistics thing. You have, masculine, feminine, not male and female, masculine and feminine. These are gender things. But then you also have indeterminate and neuter. So indeterminate example would be dog. You say the word dog, that it has a sex, but you don't know what it is yet. So you don't give the gendered language for it. Masculine would be bull, feminine would be bitch, right? And that's what you would say for a dog, and it goes along the whole animal kingdom for that. And neuter would be inanimate objects like a table and a pencil, a chair, that kind of thing. They don't have a sex, so you wouldn't describe them in any other way. And I think the whole idea of describing people through gender is instead of just referring to their sex, is a new thing that's confused so many people, because we never did this before. We would always like pronouns are not, they're not, it's the eye of the beholder, right? It's not the person or the inanimate object that decides what their pronouns are.
Well, it's not a judgment. Like when you say he, you're not passing a judgment. I mean, I suppose you're judging them as male, but it's not an insult. Like I'm not saying he because it's my opinion. It's like, I'm saying he because you're obviously male, and that's the pronoun that's associated with males. Like, it's not a big deal. This shouldn't even be a debate. And you're right. It's, we used to talk about sex, and now we talk about gender, and it's really confused things. People will argue with me when I say, a man is male, that's sex. A woman is female, it's her biological sex. And they'll say, I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about gender. And it's like, well, then stop saying that a man can be literally female, because female is sex.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter, because who can, like, again, it's okay. So he feels a type of way about masculinity. Okay, then he can feel that way. It doesn't change material reality. Like, it doesn't change his body, doesn't make him not male. And it doesn't mean that I need to be engaged with those feelings either. Like, why do I or you have to validate somebody else's feelings about gender? It's so narcissistic.
It really is. It really is. I mean, for forever, as long as we have written history, there's always been effeminate men and masculine women, and a whole array of people on that spectrum. And this is where you can say there is a spectrum. Yeah, there's a spectrum of that, but it doesn't mean anything that they're some other, whatever gobbledygook language you want to come up with to describe it. And it doesn't mean that they need to be addressed by different genders as well. As I was saying, like the pronouns are for the observer to come up with. And yeah, like personally for me, if someone has gone through the change of becoming, or not actually becoming, but appearing like the opposite sex that they were born as. I mean, as just for the sake of not being rude, I would just call them she if it was a man who clearly looked like a woman, or at least trying to look like a woman. I mean, it's just out of politeness. But matter of fact, when somebody insists that you say a thing that just doesn't feel natural to you, I mean, and I've said this before, the best way to associate with them is to not associate with them at all. Just, right. Okay, you're just kind of the kind of people I don't like to talk to. Okay, cool.
You're kind of a self-absorbed jerk, so I don't want to be around you.
And that's what really comes down to. And I think, I mean, I know as like, someone who would be hiring somebody, especially in the trades, as soon as you see pronouns on a resume, it's going in the shredder. I mean, yeah. And I'm not saying that
I don't want to have to deal with this person. I know what this means.
Well, it means you're a liability. That's what people see. And I mean, there are other things on resumes that employers are looking for that these social justice crowds, they see as an accomplishment, but they don't realize that an employer would look at it like, no, you're a liability. If you put on your resume was like an organizer for unions or whatever, like, no, I'm not. Like, in the trash, right? I don't want that.
This is going to be trouble for me, obviously.
Yeah. So, and people don't realize that. I remember reading a study once, and it was a study that people with black sounding names were discriminated on how many callbacks they got for their resumes. And then I deep dove into it because it was all free to look into information. And I looked at some of the examples of resumes that they were showing. The ones that had the black names, matter of fact, actually had stuff like that. Union organizer for whatever college and all this. I see. And it's like, well, maybe that's there. We're not in a vacuum where it's this factor or that factor. Perhaps it was other factors that led to the thing, and correlation isn't always causation. Matter of fact, right?
Yeah, and what we do know about the pronoun people is that they do create drama everywhere they possibly can about their pronouns, whether it's that they were misgendered at a bar or somebody using the wrong pronouns on social media, or of course in the workplace or anywhere else. They can drum up drama to center themselves and go after other people so that they can feel powerful about it. Why would you even bother putting your pronouns in your bio? Like, first of all, most people can tell who's male and who's female. But also, if somebody called me he by accident, I would laugh. Like, I wouldn't feel crushed. Like, I wouldn't feel like, okay, sure.
Right. Excellent judgment on this guy.
Like, I'm not going to feel like my entire identity crumbled and that I need to, like, call the cops. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of person does that?
Oh, that's really
People who are
funny.
mentally ill, narcissists, people with personality disorders, annoying people I don't want to be around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good way of dealing with these people again is just to say, yeah, I guess it turns out that you're just not my kind of people. I'm gonna go over there now and not speak with you anymore. And that's a form of social ostracism. It's almost cancel culture in its own right, but it's a knee-jerk reaction that I think people should get used to, because
Yeah.
it would really help people maybe correct some of the bad behavior that they have.
Yeah, like, oh, nobody wants to be around me when I act like this. It's not, I mean, that's not cancel culture. That's how humans work. Like, and you don't have to hang around with people or be friends with people that make you feel bad or are jerks to you or that you don't like or seem mentally unstable. I mean, that's the great thing about boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, if you're really unpleasant to be around or you act like a psycho, people are not going to want to be around you. And, I don't know, learn better social skills, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having good, and I don't think includes haranguing people about your stupid fucking pronouns. Excuse my language.
That's okay. It's well warranted in this situation. Meghan, where can people find you online and different places?
So I'm back on Twitter. Elon brought me back. Thank you, Elon. That was a long 4 years where I couldn't put my every single thought out on the internet whenever I felt like it. That's Meghan E. Murphy. I'm on Instagram at Meghan Emily Murphy, and my Substack, which is where I put a lot of my writing and all of my podcast episodes, is at www.meganmurphy.ca. I'm also on YouTube if you just search for Meghan Murphy.
Oh, perfect. When I republish this, I'll make sure that I have all those links in the description so people can go check you out. And I want to thank you so much for taking your time out of your day, whatever time it is over there in Mexico.
It's 9.
It's 9. So
sorry, I got that wrong. I just, in my brain, I was like 7:30. Got it. I'll be there.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. I saw you pop up in the thing. I said, okay, well, I'm not going to waste any of your time and bring you right into the show. So I'm going to go back to talking with the audience. I give them an opportunity to talk with me every Friday in the evenings and catch up with them a little bit. So thanks again for joining me. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. It was a good time.
Cheers.